Hey, welcome to Ditch Digger CEO today. We are excited as heck, aren't we, Chris? We've got an all-star on our show today, and we're gonna hear about a lot of cool things that entrepreneurs are blessed to be able to be part of and lead. We've got you got Dean Donovan on with us here today. Dean, welcome to Ditch Digger CEO.
Great to be here. I'm excited to do the interview and the discussion.
Well, we're here to really educate. We want to be that. We want to be kind of a mentoring podcast where people get to learn about how people did great things, right? How you built something, and we believe this American dream is something that everybody can take advantage of, and you have, I have, and Chris is, and you got to continue to make sure that that's viable in this great country, America. The more we talk about it, the more people want to do it, and that's our goal is right, getting more people to say it. Well, I think I'm going to build something myself, right? So,
Uh,
Dean's from DiamondStream Partners out of California. He's a leader there, and does many other things. So Dean, we love to kind of hear your story. Kind of where you started in life, kind of a little bit about your upbringing for a few minutes. Where you grew up, your parents, and what gave you this entrepreneurial mentality that you have today, and then go into your story, how you built this world of innovation you're part of and everything else.
yes, I grew up in San Mateo, California, part of what is now known as Silicon Valley. At that time, Silicon Valley didn't exist. It was all a bunch of orange trees and avocado growth. And my dad and mom, they came. My mom's from the Midwest. She grew up in Topeka in North Dakota, and my dad came from Boston, and he wrecked his motorcycle when he was 18, and in the middle of the winter, and he said, "You know what? I'm never gonna live in this place. It's just too cold. I love Boston, but he had had enough." So he moved out to California, and they moved to San Mateo. We moved around a little bit, lived in Florida for a little while, but he worked for a Wellston Company, which was at that time the largest brokerage and financial services, and became a vice president there. But when I was maybe 12 years old, the company went bankrupt. It's kind of an interesting company. It was one of the first investments that Ross Perot made when he was founding Electronic Data EDS. And Ross saved the company once, and the second time they had kind of commodity speculation that got out of control. My dad wasn't in that part of the business, and I remember him trying to save the business. And when that didn't work out, he went back and he became a regular, what they call a wealth manager now. Back then they called them stockbrokers. And I went to the office with him, and we wrote out lead cards, and he basically had to build up his financial life from scratch again. And that made a big impression on me that, you can be very successful, and then fate can take things away. But if you work hard, you can get it back. And within 10 years of that, he had made some smart investments. He had worked hard, and he retired. So I always thought he was.
Well, I'll interrupt there. I'll interrupt every once in a while, and I apologize ahead of time. But your story is already really cool because to think of your father creating the awareness in you as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid to understand what's going on at that time, and have your dad bringing you into places and all that. I love it, and that's not even then. It wasn't. It's more common then probably than it is now. It's still not that common even then. So for your dad to have that awareness, right, to have his son by his side to explain kind of what's going on is amazing. And then that's you can if you go a little deeper there, that'd be awesome to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it was more, we're all very privileged today. I mean, people always find about the good old days, but those good old days were pretty hard sometimes. And, when he lost his job, we didn't have any money. So we all went to work. My brothers and I got a paper route, and we made money on the paper routes. I don't think paper routes exist anymore, but we don't even have papers barely. But my mom got a job, and then we went in on Saturdays to help him with his work. And it was really less about him educating us as to what the family was going on, what was going on with the family. It was much more like we all had to pitch in because that's just what the situation was. Otherwise, we were going to lose our house, other things. And so, he was a pretty smart guy, and he had hedged his bets a little bit, but when you have a family crisis, and everyone's got to pitch in. And, that made a big impression on me. But, one of the things that's interesting about that, Gary, is I think it also gave me the sense that if you work hard at something, even if things are very, very difficult, you can always get it back. And I think there are people who have gone through that situation and their family doesn't recover and they have no confidence. And, for understandable reasons, our family recovered, and it gave me a lot of confidence that no matter what happens, you can fight your way back.
That's awesome. I love it. And again, the lessons you learn in that time, you don't usually learn until you're actually in business and you see failure and stuff like that, or you're part of failure. And people know my story, but I've had a couple major times where I lost everything. Now, without ever claiming bankruptcy, lost everything, and my bank sucked behind me. But the lessons you learn then, and by the way, I love my paper route. I was a paper boy as well, because I gained a lot of other business on that paper route, lawns to mow and leaves to rake and all that. And I wish that was still out there, because there's not a lot of paper route jobs in the country today, right?
But we got into a lot of trouble because, the paper, I remember the paper route was $25 a month for the San Francisco Chronicle. And we decided, we're doing a lot of work. Like, we live in a neighborhood that was super hilly. And so we raised prices by 50 cents. And the Chronicle got a call from some irate homeowner and then yelled at us. And we were like, hey, we're doing all the work. We should be able to set the price. You guys can love it. We got to go battle with the Chronicle over that. And I think we eventually had to reduce our prices back down to $6.25. But
they didn't give me any option to raise the prices, and I would have also, right? I had the Chicago Tribune on Sundays. The Chicago Tribune was like 4 inches thick. I had 40 of those, and but anyway, mine was $6 a week is what I got for 7-day-a-week delivery, and then but I relied on the tips. I usually got, I collected every 2 weeks and expected, not expect. I was hoping for $7 or $8 a week in tips. So I was pretty good. But then when the real money was made was the new verticals that I was part of, right? I did mowing, and then I did leaves and snow removal and all that, right? So again, but the lessons we learned there were incredible. So again, I pray that kids continue to have more opportunity to be their own little entrepreneurs, right? Because I think it makes a difference.
Selling candy at school.
Yeah. Okay. So now, you went to school. Did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to University of California, Berkeley, and that was interesting going to public university. The first day of orientation. I don't think they do this anymore because they decided they need to be nicer. But first day of orientation, they said, okay, look to your left and look to your right. One of those people is not going to graduate with you. And, you better want to be here because there's somebody who wants your plate if you don't. Okay. So I became a better student at college than in high school, partly because of that. And I wrote my undergraduate thesis on the Japanese economic miracle. I was really interested in the Toyota production system and manufacturing. And then went into manufacturing management software when I got out of school, a company called Ask Computer Systems, which was run by a woman named Sandy Kurtzik, who was one of the really early women entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. I think she might have been the first woman to take a technology company public in Silicon Valley. And
wow,
interesting company. But that was the 1980s with the beer bash at the end of work and the hot tub party, and it was a pretty fun place to work. I think the average age in the company was 23 when I joined, and so I stuck that out for 4 years, and then I went back to business school.
That's really cool. All right, so in business school, then tell us about that what you learned there, and how your lessons applied to business initially.
Yeah, so I went to Wharton, great school. To me, the really, really amazing things I learned there was just about the East Coast, because I'd grown up in California, and we all fly around the country so easily today, which is something that we'll get into. But I think I had been to the East Coast once after the age of 10 when I grew up. And so going there, realizing there were things called investment banks, there were consulting firms, there were all these Ivy League schools, just the cities themselves were completely different, very ethnic, very divided, versus California, where we all kind of blended together. And so, it was a good business experience in terms of learning the basic, but it was a great social experience in terms of just seeing the way the rest of the country was run and how things were operating, in the Northeast.
Cool. And then tell me your first business opportunity out of Wharton.
So when I came out of Wharton, I joined Bain & Company, so a consulting firm.
Yep.
And that was a fantastic experience. I ended up staying for 14 years. I ran the auto practice for a while. I ran the aviation practice, which actually turned out to be important. I helped set up the Latin America business. So we did a lot of work. I started off in Boston and then moved to Dallas and worked in Mexico for 5 years, which was really interesting and a lot of fun. I love Mexico. Incredible place. And of course, later founded a company there. And then finally in 99, Tom Tierney, who was running the firm, called me up and said, I decided to start a separate business in truck dealerships, which ended up not working out. And in the middle of that, Tom Tierney called me up and said, hey, do you want to run our Africa business? So I went down to Africa and ran Bain & Company's Africa business, which was just an absolutely amazing experience. I loved working and living in Africa. Just, every weekend we'd go out and I bought a Land Rover and we'd go 4x4ing and seeing different parts of the country, but then also seeing what a business community is like that's very, very different than the United States and that isn't linked to the United States in any way. So here, we take for granted that we have an enormously competitive society. And, it's a society where, yes, there are personal networks, but they tend to be very fluid and they tend to be based on relationships that people built up over the years in business. In South Africa, everyone who was anyone in the business community grew up together, and they went to preschool together, grammar school together, middle school together, high school together, college together. They'd known each other for all their lives. And so just small things that you would take for granted in the US, like if somebody calls you and you don't know them and you don't recognize them, the chances that you're actually going to return that call without a warm introduction is pretty low. You might, but I'd say it's 5%. And in South Africa, if you don't call somebody back who's a senior member, who's a member of the business community, you will be flayed alive. They will take great offense, and rightly so, because they're very, very tight knit, right? So as an American coming into that, you have to kind of rethink your standards of behavior. You have to rethink how you engage with people. You have to be flexible, right? And so that was a valuable experience, and spent a lot of time with different companies there. The concerns are obviously very different. The company was sort of moving away from apartheid at that time. Mandela was still president when I got down there, but it had only been 4 years since apartheid had ended. And so, basically business society was in an upheaval and people were trying to find their footing and trying to navigate that with, a lot of the challenges that came out of that was very interesting.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. How many companies did you oversee for Bain in South Africa then at that point?
So we worked for a bunch of different South African companies, mostly. We worked for Anglo American. We worked for, De Beers, really the De Beers division of Anglo American. We worked for South Africa Airways. We worked for the Revenue Service, South Africa Revenue Service. We worked for FedSure, which is a big insurance company, and did a
So
lot.
when you were leading that, Dean, so your team, basically, you had a team of consultants that were in front of all these companies, basically consulting them on all different things. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. So we had a team of people, and when I went there, the business had mostly expats, in the business, and a lot of people who had been hired locally had probably not been hired in the way that we wanted them to be hired. So basically my job was to build up the South African franchise and make it stable. So bring in people who were tied to South Africa, who are highly competent, who we could develop into talented people. And we did that. We brought in, we turned over a lot of the team, which was a tough thing to do. We reduced the percentage of expats that were on the team, and we hired people that were more connected into the environment and the country. And that took 2 or 3 waves because, your standards change as you look at things. And when I saw the business and what it had, I said, geez, we need to improve this. So we replaced some people. We brought in some better people. And then we thought, geez, the people that we thought were okay before, maybe they're not quite as good as I thought. So we did a second wave and a third wave before I really got that sorted out. But we had a great advantage, which was young people were really excited in outside firms. And so we could really hire some of the best talent in the country. And a lot of those people have gone on to do just absolutely amazing things. And I've worked with later on in my career. So that was a very exciting time. And there was a lot of change going on in South Africa. And when you've had a country that's been closed for many, many years, and you bring inside ideas, it really gives you an appreciation for how much the openness of our society benefits us. And we don't see it every day because not in a closed society. We don't know what it's like to not have interaction with the rest of the world. But if you're deprived of that, you fall behind very, very quickly.
Sure. Wow. That would be amazing. And did you have a family? Do you have kids, your wife and kids and everything at this point?
I met my wife in South Africa. So I'm married to a South African, got married in South Africa. And she's actually Indian, South African Indian community.
So when you go out to dinner and stuff like that, nobody wants to listen to you, right, Dean? They want to listen to that accent. I got a bunch of South African friends and man, I just love their accents. I want to listen. Actually, I'm going to dinner with one of my board members tomorrow night, him and his wife, both from South Africa. And my fiance, she'll just get a kick out of listening to them. Number one, they're very sharp people. Number two, they're just really great, great accents. They're fun to listen to.
Oh, they're fun. And she's much more charming than me anyway. So it's not just the accent. I lose on all counts.
I love it. Okay, so but when you think about that experience, so that was, you basically had to be a mentor of many, in my opinion. If you're there leading this new market, all of these young people, how'd you go about that? Did you have some type of mentorship program, or what'd you do to bring people into leadership and understand what it takes to communicate with leaders and in this community? Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was I spent a lot of time on performance standards and clarifying with the team what the performance standards were. And, the biggest challenge I'd say is a lot of the clients were not as demanding as clients in North America or in Europe. And that's just because they hadn't been exposed to as much of a competitive kind of society. It was a much smaller market and it had been closed. So, my biggest struggle was like, how do we set performance expectations at a level that is comparable to Europe and North America so that we can get those people up to that level? Because there's sort of a tyranny of low expectations if your clients don't have the right expectations.
Yeah.
What we did was we spent a lot of time on giving people coaching and input through those performance reviews. And that was really helpful. And then we did some stuff to, build team cohesion, which, everyone does. But when you're doing that in Africa, it's a little bit different. So I took the team to Malawi one time. I took them to northern Namibia one time, up to a place called the Zebra Mountains, and it's sort of South Africa is sort of a risk-on environment, right? We don't have all the liability laws and stuff. So we went to the Zebra Mountains, up to this place called the Pupa Fall. And I said, hey, you guys, do you want to go swim across to Angola? And I asked the guides, hey, is it safe to swim to Angola? And so we were in Namibia, right? And the other side of the river is Angola side. I got a bunch of the guys to say, yeah, sure, let's go swim to Angola. Just to say we did it, just to say we went to Angola. So I asked the guys, hey, is it safe to swim across this river? Like, oh yeah, it's safe. Don't worry about it. No problem. So we jump in the river, about 10 or 12 of us, and we swim across to this island that's at 85% of the way there. And it has this little river in it. And we're wading through this little substream of the river. And there's a crocodile in the middle of this river. Oh, man. So we went over to Angola, said we stepped on it, and then we swam back. And I was terrified every second. And I got out of the water, and the park ranger came over to me. And he started screaming. He was like, "Did you guys get in that river? It's full of crocodiles. It's gonna be killed." And sure enough, we went on a river rafting trip the next day. There's like dead sheep floating by it, killed stuff. So it was definitely like a different kind of environment working.
That's quite. I think you could make that a program, a leadership retreat where you got away, you got to swim the Angola there, and follow through crocodiles. I think that would create cohesion in any type of leadership group, in my opinion.
And I had to take a different view of risk from them too, because I'll tell you one story. You should edit this stuff out if it's too much, but we went up to Sun City, and it was the very first management team meeting I had, and I was explaining to them how the firm worked, because it had been totally entrepreneurial before then, just completely seat of the pants. So I was trying to explain to the team kind of how the firm worked, where they fit, all of that kind of stuff. And the hotel staff came out, and there was a porch outside this conference room, and the hotel staff came out and they put biscuits, which are cookies in America, and tea out there. And about 10 minutes before my presentation was supposed to end, a troop of baboons came in, and I thought, oh my God, the baboons are eating the cookies. This is terrible. We should call security. But the South Africans didn't think that way. The South Africans were like, the baboons are taking my cookies. It's time to go fight the baboons. And so all of a sudden, my management teams turned into the giant cookie throwing melee between the baboons and my management team. You're flying everywhere, Oh, it's funny. Crockery's breaking it. Oh my God, what am I getting myself into? But they definitely had a different attitude towards risk, and refreshing and invigorating in a way. They would go and they would take risks where Americans, today's Americans might shy away. And so that was a fun part of it for me, learning about their culture, and then trying to incorporate that into how the firm worked. And not surprisingly, a large number of those guys went off and founded their own businesses or started businesses because that was their attitude.
How cool is that, right? To know that you put a team together, you have these team events, you mentored, and many of those people have gone on to be great leaders themselves, and it's gratifying to know that, isn't it?
It's hugely satisfying, Gary. I mean, I love that. I love seeing the guys I worked with succeed. That's like, it's almost better than seeing me succeed, although I like that too.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think life is about, being able to have the wisdom to understand, your own strengths and weaknesses, and then be able to share your experiences with others that may not have, probably don't have the same experiences, but that you can then share your experiences with, and to know that they may go on to be a little more successful because of what you share with them, right? And that's kind of really good mentorship if you do that kind of consistently. So I think that's some of the best gratification we can have in life. We can get wealthy ourselves. That's great, right? And we all love to reach levels of success financially, but more than that, when we look back, it's not going to be how much money we made if you're a servant, right? It's going to be how many people did you serve really well. And I think, when you look back, of course, you look back now, and you got to feel that way, right? But eventually we're going to look back and not be in this working world so much, and we can then be really, really excited about people building things that we may have helped get to where they're at that point, right? Fun stuff. So okay, so you were there. You learned all this stuff from Bain, and then tell me what happened after that. I mean, you started a business then, not this little airline or something like that, or what happened after?
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of things happened that sort of led to the airline getting formed. I uh, I had a friend who was a client who had worked at South African Airways, and he went back to the U.S. He wanted to start a private equity fund. So I helped him start a private equity fund in Mexico, and then I took off. And my wife and I traveled around Africa in our Land Rover for a year, drove 36,000 kilometers and 23 countries, and camped in the bush and all that kind of stuff. And when I came back, my friend, a guy named Kevin Wilson, called me up and said, "Hey, Dean, we got to start an airline in Mexico." And I was like, "Okay, Kevin, what are you thinking?" And he knew that I had run the practice and had a lot of airline expertise. "What are you thinking?" And he said, "Well, Mexico's, the last big market in the world that doesn't have a low cost carrier." So I said, "That sounds pretty smart. Let's talk about that." So we spent some time working on the business plan, thinking about the idea, and we decided that we needed an existing airline partner. So we went down to this fateful meeting, and we pitched Taka Airlines and Roberto Creed in particular. And I pulled in another guy I knew from Bain, a guy named Brian Flynn. And we had wanted to start businesses together after I left Bain. So I left in May of 2003. And so Kevin and I and Brian went down to Mexico, and we pitched this idea to Roberto Creed and his team at Taka. Now, it was a funny meeting because one of my mentors at Bain, a guy named Stan Pace, was there, and he had run the airline practice at Bain before me. And then most of Taka's strategy team were guys that had worked for me in the aviation practice at Bain, and many of them in South Africa. And so that was kind of a funny meeting because it was a very insiders meeting, and we spoke about it for 5 hours. Mexico had not been on Taka's radar at the time. And at the end of the meeting, Enrique Beltramena, who was the chief operating officer at Taka, looked at me and he goes, "Dean, you must understand," and Enrique's a very intimidating guy. He's 6'5", very strong opinions, Latin American, German. And he said, "Dean, what you must understand is Mexico is for Mexicans." He was basically telling me, "Dean, this is never going to work. Like, you're trying to start a business in a place where you shouldn't be starting a business." And of course, 20 years later, Enrique's the CEO of that business. And when he finally got his Mexican citizenship after living in Mexico for 15 years, because he's Guatemalan originally, he told me, "Dean, you see, I was right. I'm a Mexican and Mexico is for Mexicans." And I said, "Fine, Enrique, you're right all along." No. We then put the alliance together with Roberto, and together we went out and we refined the business plan with the help from Taka. And then Harry Krensky, who was one of Kevin's partners in his private equity fund, and the rest, who was also part of this, and a number of other people, went out and recruited Carlos Slim and Emilio Azcárraga into the deal. So we ended up having a 4-sided deal, and it was a great deal. So we got the airline started in 2006 was the first flight. So it was really a 2-year project to get it off the ground. And after 3 months, we had a really, really pivotal decision to make where, people like to invest in things and they like propositions that are very comfortable to them. Like they feel like, "Oh, I understand that. I would use that." I had seen that in the car business when I worked in the car business. People like engineers making cars that they would like to drive, even if they're not the cars that their customers might want to drive sometimes. And, we saw that the same in Polaris, where there was a big debate on whether we should serve business customers or whether we should serve, the emerging Mexican middle class. And that was about 3 months into the company, and we had a big strategy discussion. We brought in the founders of WestJet, and And we ultimately decided, hey, why go after a market that the existing guys have when we could go after a whole new market of people who are not served at all? And we decided to go after the visiting friends and relative market in Mexico. And really that set the foundation for the long-term strategy of the company.
That's amazing. Rachel, tell us about that the exact niche that you didn't see being served that you guys knew you could serve.
Yeah, so Mexico was kind of a unique market. It had two legacy airlines, Mexicana and Aeromexico. They were both focused at business passengers. They were both had a very formal kind of service. So, for example, when we started the airline, flight attendants were often told not to speak with passengers unless they were spoken to first, unless they had a specific service item. Just everyone wore ties. It was a very traditional kind of business, and it was focused on the business passengers in Mexico. So the way that they had made money was that competition was limited. They raised prices every year. The market was not growing very much. And in every place else in the world, prices were coming down on a real basis, and aviation was growing much faster than ground transportation. And so we saw an opportunity, which is, hey, there's a huge price umbrella here. And if we come in and we offer, oh, and sorry, one more thing. The consequence of that was penetration of flying was very, very low in Mexico. And Mexico had, at that time, the largest bus market in the world. And so, it was very clear what was happening because of the strategy that the leaders in the market had taken. People were taking buses instead of air because they couldn't afford it. And too high. And so we said, hey, if we take the cost down by 40%, we can open up this market to a whole different generation of people, a whole different economic strata of people, and grow this market very substantially and build a whole new business out of that even though it obviously competes in some elements with Aeromexico and Mexicana, in other elements, it doesn't compete at all because we're really going after different customers. And that thesis turned out to be true. We tripled the size of the Mexican aviation market in a little over 10 years by following that strategy. Now the challenge was we weren't the only people who had that idea, and partially because others followed us, and partially because others had seen similar ideas in other countries. And so the country went from having 4 or 5 airlines to having 13 airlines in a very short period of time. And it became a very, very competitive environment. And so we had to work through that competition.
So it started there in Volare, right?
Volaris. Yeah.
Volare. Okay, Volare started in what year? And then how long were you on board there?
Yeah, so we really started the discussions on it in 2004, and the first flight happened in 2006. The partners funded the initial business plan development and so on, and worked on it together. And then in 2005, late 2005, we brought on Enrique as the CEO, and I've been on the board ever since. So I participated in all the formation of the company, hiring of the management team, development of the business plan, and then I participated on the board.
Awesome. And then when did you exit that business, and what's it look like today?
Yeah, so we exited the business over time. I think we sold our last shares in 2019, but what happened was, we grew the business pretty rapidly, and we hit a point in 2013 where we felt like we could take it public, and so we did. We took it public on the New York Stock Exchange in 2013. It was about a $500 million business then, and we've grown it steadily since then, through some ups and downs, and it's now, I think it'll be $3.5 billion this year. So it's a big business. It's got over 100 aircraft. It's got 7,000 employees. So it's amazing. And, and it has really changed people's lives in Mexico. It's people no longer travel on the bus for a lot of the trips they used to travel on. It used to take 3 days to go from Mexico City to Tijuana on the bus, and be about $250. Now you can go there in 4 hours for less cost.
Amazing. What do you feel your strongest points were, really, Dean, in starting this and all? What were your what do you think your niche value was to the leadership team when you guys started this, that Dean Donovan brought to the table, this non-Mexican guy, this kind of out of towner, right? There's got to be some amazing value you brought to gain buy-in from a lot of people that said they might have thought this guy maybe shouldn't have been the right guy, right? To actually lead and listen to.
Yeah, so I think the most important attribute I brought, and I think it was also an attribute of a number of other people, Roberto and particularly Harry Krinsky on the board, was we were very determined to work together as a team to make the company successful. And, so I start off with that because when things are really difficult, and we had some extremely difficult times, we had one point where we only had 5 days cash in the business left. And it was really the fact that we all stuck together and worked on the problems constructively together that saved the business or made it successful. And I can't stress that enough. If you have the right people on your board and they work together cooperatively, I think that makes an enormous difference. And Valaris had a very activist board. So I was one of the people on the board that had a lot of aviation experience. There were other people on the board who had Wall Street experience or political experience in Mexico. I was in the middle of the decision to focus the company on Western Mexico. So in spending time with the WestJet guys and some others, it became clear to me that it was going to be tough to compete directly with people with frequent flyer programs. And we had some of the people in the investor group that wanted to focus on business travel and not VFR and low-cost carrier model. And so I was one of the big advocates on the board for low-cost carrier model and trying to pure. Yeah.
So Dean, when you think about the value of that team, that board, right, when in tough times, when do you feel like a business should have a board? I started a board late in my career and wish I would have done it when I was very small, right? Even if it's just advisors that I respect on a board that I should have put together when I was a $2 million company, in my opinion, right? What's your opinion on that?
Hey, I think small companies need boards, and it's hard because a lot of times founders they don't want to relinquish any control of things. They see boards as threatening. But, when I talk to my daughter, what teenagers like, I used to give her advice, and then she'd tell me how wrong all my advice was. And then one day I sat her down and I said, hey, look, like, this advice is not telling you what to do. This advice is something that you can take or you can leave. But, if you're going to be as good as you can be, you need to get good advice because you don't know everything. Nobody does. And so, I would say you're better off with a great board early on, even if you just call them advisors. If a bad board, you're worse off. So it's much more
true
to have good quality and have fewer people, or to not have anything than have poor quality. And, that would be my advice.
I like it. All right. So
no matter how talented the management team is, I mean, I think the more talented the management team is, the more effective a board can be in helping them.
So when you think, from that time, exiting Valaris, what did you do next? What was your, what did you dive into next?
So I'd also started a couple other companies and ran a couple of companies while, after we had gotten Valaris up and running, I was sitting on the board. So I ran a couple of ad tech companies, and then started a company doing casino marketing analytics with Brian, my partner. That was pretty successful. Also helped to start a bank, and that was also pretty successful. So we exited both of those at around 2015. And, partly we exited because it was time, and partly we exited because we wanted to refocus on aviation and aerospace. And there were things going on in aviation and aerospace that were really remarkable. It was clear in 2016 that we're going to create a generational change in transportation. And we just felt like we should be spending all of our time on that. So that's kind of the decision we arrived at in 2016, really got DiamondStream Partners founded based on that. And then it took us about 4 years to really fully get that dimension and get it started. And so we started the fund in 2020.
So tell us about this fund. Tell us about the fund, what you focused on originally, where you are today. And Chris, I want you to join in and ask questions. I know you've got a lot of questions with all the conversations we've had already, but kind of lead us to where you're at today with your partnership.
Yeah, so just going back to Volaris for a second, the thing we learned at Volaris is that growing transportation businesses is mostly around relative cost economics. So if you can offer a cheaper product that gets people there faster, what we call cost-effective speed, you can actually generate a really big business in transportation. And so what we saw going on in transportation in 2016, the middle of last decade, was there were two changes that were going on in aviation and aerospace that were going to change everything, because they were going to change the relative cost economics between ground transportation and air. So if you think of air above 500 miles, it basically owns the above 500-mile transportation market for people. And in air freight, even though it's relatively small, it's less than 1% of all freight is moved by air. It's something like 8% of the value. So it really punches above its weight. But when you get below 500 miles, instead of 40% share, air has about 0.4% share. And so there were two technological innovations that were evolving in the 2010s that were going to change all of that. And the first is electric propulsion, which had already happened in cars. And electric propulsion really changed how efficient small aircraft were. So typically energy conversion efficiency, maybe 25% on a small aircraft, and on a 777, it might be 65%. By the way, 777's engines are incredible. Like one 77 engine has like 2 times the power of all the steam engines on the Titanic, just to give you.
Wow.
I mean, the technology is incredible. But an electric motor is 95% efficient, and that engine, that turbofan engine, is only about 65% efficient. So what that does, that changes how efficient transportation under 500 miles can be, which is where all the small aircraft, really a small aircraft market. And so we knew that was going to become more efficient versus ground transportation. And the second was autonomy, where you have all these unmanned aircraft. I mean, people are familiar with the drones that were flying around in Afghanistan and so on in the second Iraq war. They're flying them from the US, eye in the sky and all of that kind of stuff. But making that commercially available to everyone was something that was definitely on the horizon, by the middle of the last decade. And people think, oh, that's substituting pilots. It's not really about substituting pilots. If you take the pilot out of the aircraft, there's so much weight that you have to put into the aircraft to maintain it for human beings. You can have an aircraft that's 90% lighter to do the same thing. And that again replaces, ground transportation with air transportation for freight, potentially for people, and makes it much, much cheaper.
Sure.
And then the third thing that became really apparent is, around this aviation space, is that robotics had really been a fixed point location type of thing for most of its history. And as soon as you start putting things into the air that are mobile, you can really grow the robotic market a lot, and you can substitute labor for machines mobily. So just to give you a simple example of that, our company Wingtray that we were talking about before the call, if you can make it really cheap to do land survey, when you're doing a construction project, you can get a full map of everything that happened on a construction site every single day. And then if you do a digital twin of that and you do change detection, you can see what happened. Now you can compare it to your daily site plan without
Sure.
ever send someone out to the site. Now that would have been, an hour in a car. It would have been walking around and you wouldn't have seen the whole site. So that's
Funny. Yeah, it's funny how your world of in the airline business and consulting, all things have led you to, to be an investor in that business. My world of paving and roofing and all things I do have led me to the same space. And we have a couple of companies that are very aligned when we look at that.
Yeah.
Chris is from he's heard me talking about this a lot, and the world of AI and machine learning, where it's going and how it's so exciting to be part of it. Coming from basic blue collar businesses, you kind of same way. I came from some blue collar stuff and consulting, and then the airline business, and now you're kind of you're invested in a very similar space that we are in our company called Site Technology. It's pretty crazy how this comes together, huh, Chris?
Yeah, it's wild the path it takes.
Yeah, it's fusion. I mean, it's where robotics is going, right? It's going to mobile jobs, not just factories. And that's pretty exciting. I think it's going to make people's lives a lot better. Although I can understand why some people would be like a little bit nervous about it. But it's interesting stuff. So yeah, so those are the premises that we set this business up on. And, we thought about setting up an individual business to do this. And we decided, there are too many things going on. There's too much complexity. You can't get your head really around it unless you have a broader view. And so we decided to do a fund instead of, doing what Brian and I had done the last 20 years, which was just setting up business after business to do this different things. And I think that was a good decision. And it's been a ton of fun. It's been mentoring the guys that are doing the businesses, and it's a space that is not well understood. It's not very well served by venture capitalists today. And so it's just sort of a unique business that I think is very helpful to people who are in this space trying to figure this stuff out.
Sure. I love it. And when you look at the future, where do you feel like your investment group will invest the most in? I mean, will it continue to be, air, will it be air and technology? Will it be, manufacturing? Will it be going other directions, in your opinion, as you might be able to use some of this technology for other industries?
Yeah, so I think the idea of aerial robotics, it's one area that we're going to be very, very focused on. And just because it has such broad applicability, and it's really changing what was traditionally the aerospace and aviation business. There used to be a clear line, and the line was, okay, I'm going to move a person or I'm going to move a thing. And then the end of that is the person receives that thing on the other end and they do whatever you're going to do with it. With aerial robotics, I think what's happening is the actual workflow and day-to-day businesses is being facilitated from the air. And that means you need kind of a software front end to help people do that workflow, but you also need the robotics in the actual aircraft. And those things need to be tightly integrated. Like
Right.
people who think you can do that without tight integration between the hardware and the software. And that may be true in some cases, but in the more complex cases, I don't think that that's going to work. And so we see that as kind of a key area for investment. And then, we also are investing in more traditional aviation under 500 miles and even aviation over 400 miles. We've got this really crazy deal called Jet Zero, which I just love. And it's a blended wing body aircraft. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but it looks like the B-2 bomber, but it's for commercial aviation. And so it's 40% less fuel burn per seat. And, it's just super cheap to operate for commercial airlines. And it's a really, really interesting aircraft if you go into the model inside of it and you can see what it looks like. And so that's sort of transformational for the commercial aviation business, which I obviously worked in for a long time. So we're not ruling that sort of thing out. As a matter of fact, if we see those things, we're we're excited about them and we invest in them. But as you would expect in a mature industry, there's fewer of those huge ideas in commercial aviation than there are in sort of aerial intelligence or aerial robotics, which is, where we think a lot of our investments are going to be in the future.
And what do you, how much money, how much do you have, or, financial investment do you look forward to in the next 5 years in investing in other ideas and companies and startups and all the venture capital you put forward? What do you see in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so our current fund that we're raising is a $150 million fund, and we expect to have about $2 of co-investment for every dollar in the fund. So probably $400 to $500 million focused on this space. So that's a fair amount of money. A lot of these businesses need a fair amount of capital. So it's not a massive amount of money. And we specialize in kind of the late seed through Series B stages. So what we're really looking for is people who are getting started, still trying to figure out their business models and need a lot of advice. And, once you get to these late stage deals that are, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, they can hire McKinsey or someone like that to give them advice because the amount of money is so large. And they're not in that kind of early founding stage that it takes somebody who's been there to do, to help them with that. So we're kind of focused on that, and I love that.
So if you listen, if you get a chance, listen to one of our podcasts. It's got General Borling on it. He's a 6.5-year prisoner of war in Vietnam. He was a Top Gun pilot, but he became a major general, and he was on my board. But he's got a great potential. I think it's really almost a business now. He's got some investors in and stuff, and they're doing pretty well. But it's a high-speed air travel. It's a way to travel, much faster than we do today. I'd love for you to meet him sometime, but maybe listen to the podcast, and if you want to meet him sometime, I'll put you in front of him, and you guys could have a great conversation, in my opinion, because he's into a couple different startups, and this one sounds really exciting to me, but I don't know enough about it to understand if I should invest or not. So I'd love to hear your opinion of it sometime.
Yeah. Hey, would love to. That sounds like fun. Always love to meeting new people and hearing their ideas. So
Yeah. So Chris, what do you got? Your brain's probably exploding here with questions and all that for this awesome guy.
Yeah, Dean, I mean, thank you for sharing your stories, man. Like, what a wild and awesome life you have led thus far. Your stories are hilarious. So it sounds like you've been fortunate enough to find a lot of opportunities in life, both job opportunities and business opportunities, and you're very open-minded and adventurous. Clearly, moving to Africa, South Africa, the job with Bain. Do you have a specific strategy for finding and evaluating opportunities, both job and business?
yeah, I mean, serendipity. So I think if you hang around with great people, you end up with great opportunities. And so, I've always tried to hang around with people that are smarter than me and build relationships with people who I admire. And that has always led me to some pretty good opportunities. So I think that's one part of it. The second thing, and I think this one took me a while to learn, and it's one of the reasons I came back to aviation and aerospace, is I think focus is really important. Like if you want to do something great, you really need to have the context around those opportunities. And the more context you have, the more opportunity you see. You see things that other people don't see. And Gary, you're probably a much better example of this than me, because you've done this your whole life and, have obviously built up an incredible array of startup businesses and businesses that have gotten beyond that. So I think that focus is pretty important. And then the third piece is, I think you have to be genuinely interested. And, I've always been personally excited about things that I think can create change and create value. And so I'm always listening. I'm always willing to listen to people who have ideas. And my partners laugh at me because they're like, "Hey, you always want to figure out the entire industry and every single piece of it." And there is some truth to that. I'm just very curious, uh, and I don't discount people just because they're not necessarily the flavor of the month. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of bad ideas. I mean, there are a lot of crazy ideas, and we keep a catalog of the craziest ideas that we've heard of, which I won't mention any of them online. I don't want to diss anybody online, but there are lots of crazy ideas. Those are sometimes even more fun to listen to than the good ideas. But like, how could anybody ever even dream of this? But I'm just some frogs to do it. And you got to really be open and willing to do that and put yourself out there to talk to people, even if it's just something that comes in, over your info at DiamondStream or whatever the relevant kind of random channel is.
Awesome.
I love that
Absolutely.
I love that catalog of craziest ideas. Once in a while, right? One of those crazy ideas I think are crazy today don't often stay crazy, right? They actually become real. That's a cool idea.
It's so true. When I was a consultant, consultants are very, by nature, they're sort of saying, "Hey, this is unlikely to work. You shouldn't do it." And there's a lot of that in consulting. And having been out of consulting, and that's very appropriate for large companies, I think. One of the things that's amazed me about being in the entrepreneurial community is just how people can will things into existence. And they just pivot and pivot and pivot until they find, what their intuition tells them is valuable. And not everybody's good at it, but there are people who do things that I just would not have believed, and that's exciting. I love that. I love it when the underdog wins, and everybody says they couldn't do it. So there's sort of I have a natural affinity for those guys.
No doubt. Chris,
Yeah.
what else? Yeah.
Absolutely. Dean, so, it sounds like you've done a lot of different things. You're clearly like a passionate person. What is it about the aviation space that is so intriguing and exciting and worth spending, all of your time focused on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the things that I like about the aviation space a lot is it is a very technologically driven business. It's a demanding business. It's an engineering business. So I just find it fascinating that things can fly. So, I mean, pretty much everybody in the space has some love of just flying. And so that's a part of it. That's probably alone not enough for me. For a lot of people, it is. And the thing that really got me excited, both about Volaris and our current business, is just the amount of impact that this has, and I call transportation the invisible fabric. I mean, it's really what holds everything together, and we all take it for granted, but most people have lived within 30 minutes or 40 minutes of their home for 2,000 years, ever since ancient Rome, and probably before then. And so if you can change the dynamics of transportation, you're changing everything. One reason that housing was cheap after World War II is the car was invented. And so it opened up, a geometrically increased amount of land and got people out of tenements in New York and into suburban homes in New Jersey. And so you can make a real impact. So transportation in general is something I've always been interested in for that reason. And then the disruption that's associated with those two technological changes in aviation meant that there was a lot to do. And so you put that together, just sort of intrinsic interest in flying, kind of the impact that transportation has on the society, and the technological change that means you can make a lot of stuff happen right now. That really led us to where we are today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so true. I'm in Barcelona. That's where I live. Moved here in February, and we can fly anywhere for like $30. It's like a complete game changer.
People don't really appreciate the miracle of modern aviation. So you got do either of you guys have tennis shoes on? You look very professional, but you're only I know one of you has tennis shoes on. So the capital cost of tennis shoes is about 25 cents a mile. So if you're wearing tennis shoes, you buy them, you walk around in them, it's going to cost you about 25 cents a mile to walk around in tennis shoes. The capital cost of a car is about 40 cents a mile. Take a guess at what the capital cost per seat mile is of someone flying around on an A320. It's a penny.
10 cents.
It's 1 penny, 1 cent.
Wait, Chris, you see it somewhere?
You cheater. From there,
Amazing. A penny. Wow.
yeah, it's amazing, and Chris, you probably aren't old enough, but Gary and I probably remember when we didn't fly that much, when you didn't have fresh berries in the middle of the winter. If you sent your kid to an education across the country, you didn't see them for 4 years because it was too expensive to fly. And we take all of that for granted today. It's the world's cheapest and most efficient public transportation that's ever been devised. And so, I wake up every morning thinking about that as a miracle, and just really appreciating being a part of it. And it's incredible. And the things we can do, we've got this one company called Swiss Drones, and they do oil field inspection. It's a 200-pound helicopter. They can inspect for methane up and down an oil pipeline 50 miles at a time. Nobody else can do that. And 3% of the methane, or it's 3% of the natural gas that's made in the world leaks, and whatever your position on climate change is, that's $20 billion of natural gas a year that just escapes into the environment. And, and on the climate change side, it's potentially a big greenhouse gas, and we can affect that. I mean, that's very motivating, that kind of stuff. Or, the blended wing body aircraft, Jet Zero I talk about, taking 40% of the fuel cost out. I mean, that makes transportation affordable to people. It changes everyone's life. That's a cool.
The lives that are saved because of this technology are incredible, as you know as well, right? Whether it's flying planes, or it's way safer than driving or walking per mile, right? When we look at, so we have robots that travel through pipe at high speeds with these 3D cameras that basically look for leaks in sewers that are caused by gas cross bores, gas lines that go across sewer lines that actually leak into those sewers that cause explosions, right? And we find these on a weekly basis where these robots go through hundreds of miles of pipe a week in about 10 markets in the country, and we're finding gas leaks that will cause or likely cause explosions in homes and buildings within a short period of time. So again, that's what our tech, we have to be excited about the world of technology when you can continue to improve lives and save lives, right? So I mean, our drone business, like kind of like the one you're part of, our site technology, took the cost of assessment of a 1 million square foot pavement from $20,000 to $40,000 to $1,500 to $3,500, and it's way better. 200-300% better information for our customer, way better data. It's all in the cloud instead of delivered by a PDF, right? So when you think about how much that industry has been improved through AI and that technology, that assessment technology, It's amazing, right? And again, we'll continue to do this, in my opinion, while creating jobs too, by the way, right? Because people weren't doing 100% capture of these properties because it was too expensive, too time consuming. It would take 4 or 5 weeks before. Today it takes 4 or 5 hours, maybe 2 days at the high end, right? Or a 1 million square foot site to be assessed. So again, when you think about what you're doing, what we're doing, what all innovative companies today are doing, they're creating more time to enjoy life. Hopefully, the technology is saving lives, technology is saving dollars, and very often, in my opinion, creating more great jobs.
For sure. And doesn't it just motivate you every day, Gary? I mean, doesn't it fire you up? I love it.
So much fun. It's so much fun to really know that you're changing industries with your teams, and the innovation that we can leverage today is changing the way we do business. And I think if we're about that, it's exciting. If we're about just doing things the same old way we have been, it's just not that exciting, right? It's just not that fun. And by the way, our odds of being driven out of business are much higher if we're not continually moving forward, in my opinion.
For sure.
And we see that in you in a big way. I mean, all the stuff you've been doing to take that to go in these markets, leading at Bain in a market where this white guy from America, probably wasn't looked upon as one of the boys or somebody that they saw a lot of. I'm just guessing, right? And then to go to Mexico and then lead in this in Valaris in this startup. Again, kind of not one of the normal guys, right? It just looks because you're a little different looking. You probably had to earn some respect in other ways. Again, but it just proves that when you have that assertiveness like you do, and that passion to learn and the passion to love people and love your team, it comes through pretty strongly, right? I'm confident of that. Knowing just listening to you talk about how much passion you have and how much love you have for the people you've served and the business you're in. And it's just good things happen, and it's fun to see what you've done, and it's going to be fun to see where you go forward. So I want to keep in touch with that. And when we think about, Chris, the nuggets, the takeaways, right? I mean, some of the coolest things, like just simple concept, but a lot of people don't get it, right? But surround yourself with great people. Gravitate to great people, and great opportunities will come from that, as well as great teammates, which you can eventually, bring to your team, right? When you think of paper route to world-class entrepreneur, world-class business builder, right? I mean, I got to tell you, if we can teach our kid about business early and how to work at a young age, and whether it's making $5 a week or $50 a week, or whatever a kid can make, if we as entrepreneurs can inspire our kids to want to make a little bit of money and do some fun things at an early age, it's invaluable. Chris knows my grandson, my oldest grandchild, I have 5, is Lincoln. Lincoln has a business now, Chris and Dean. He's in Puerto Rico, an island called Vieques, and they have all these aloe plants in their yard. They're growing, and their neighbors are growing. He's harvesting the aloe plants. He's doing lotions, and he's doing soaps out of it. And on weekends, he sells this aloe at these farmers markets. And he's got a pitch down really well. It's really fun to watch. He's actually making really good money, and he's excited as can be to watch that happen. It's really cool. In a very small market at 10,000 people on the island, he's making some serious money for an 8-year-old kid, right? So it's really fun to watch that kind of stuff happen. But how do we find those paper routes for our kids of the future, right? Because if you listen to our podcast, you're going to find, I don't know, Chris, what do you think? Maybe 15 out of the 100 that really took a lot of pride in the fact they started with a newspaper route, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like a lot, yeah.
And Chris is gonna have a couple more takeaways, but another thing that I really get out of it is how, again, it's a small world, and your passion for flight and I think really drives that. But I mean, it's a small world. When you think about being able to lead in a California boy that to go to Africa and lead there, and then and Mexico to lead there, it's a small world. Don't be afraid to find a new market, to go to a market that you might love. Geographically, right? And go after leadership in a new market, figure it out. Because when you do, man, your mind is open to leadership anywhere and investing anywhere, because you get the culture of many environments that most of us never in our lifetimes have an opportunity to. So that's amazing, right? And then I love your keep a catalog of the crazy ideas. You might want to go back to someone and say, man, we didn't execute on that one because we thought it was crazy, but look, that guy Elon Musk, he did that, right?
Hopefully there's too many of those, but I'll be happy for him if it turned out that way.
Yeah, we might want to buy that book and the authors of those crazy ideas. But so Chris, what do you pull out of this?
Yeah, so much. No matter what happened, you can fight your way back. I think as long as you have that in your back pocket, there's nothing that this world can throw at you to stop you. If you feel your paper route is underpaying you, just raise the price yourself. If you get asked to run a company in Africa, definitely do it. Take it. But don't swim to Angola.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You need good advice to be as good as you can be, and seeing mentees succeed is almost as satisfying as your own success. And who actually did win the baboon cookie fight in the end?
No, we won the baboon cookie fight.
Oh, okay.
Another.
Good to know. Yeah. Dean, where can our audience find out more about you?
Well, we have a website, so you can reach us, and you can also reach out to me at dean@diamondstream.com.
Awesome. And Dean, I'd like to put, you want to listen to that podcast first. Otherwise, Chris, let's just put General Borling in front of Dean. I think they get a kick out of each other, number one. And, maybe there's something. I know he's got a couple people that have committed to investing in, bigger dollars in his technology. But, if or when it works, because he's very, very driven, this buddy of mine who's 84 years old, unbelievable entrepreneur, unbelievable board member of ours for our companies. But anyway, if or when this works, it's going to be an amazing game changer in the world of flight for probably higher income people, executives, that kind of thing. But there's a market for it for sure if you listen to it and hear his pitch. So love for you to. Good, cool. All right, well, hey, I'll tell you what, this is awesome, Dean. We've never had anybody on that was really a leader in starting an airline and doing the things you've done. So you're a new it's a new threshold for us. So we really appreciate you being on and sharing your time with us today. And if you need anything from us ever, Chris, share my cell number with Dean. And if you ever need anything in the paving world that I'm very knowledgeable at, the ditch digger type of blue collar stuff that I do, where we've strived to be the best at. If you ever need a partner in that space, I'm here for you. And site technology. If you look at that and you see there's a way we should partner, with the company Wintra, right? Wingtra. Let me know if there's a way we need a partner there in any way, whether it's our leaders. Again, your statement, great people equal great opportunities. We've got some great people in our team. I'm sure you do on yours. And it's a big industry with very little competition. So I look at great competition to network with and to grow with I think it's very important in this time, this new industry. So love to do that as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I enjoyed hearing your story, Gary, and just chatting with you guys for an hour. It was a real privilege. So hopefully we can touch.
Let's keep in touch. You'll have my cell phone number. You need anything, you ever come to Chicago or Naples, I'm here, these two locations, different times of the year. Of course, wintertime, I choose Florida, and summertime, I choose the Chicagoland area. But if you ever in these areas, you want to go to lunch or something, we'd love to get you out.
I would love to do that.
Thanks, Dean. You have a great day. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Ditch Digger CEO. We're really pushing the envelope when it comes to great entrepreneurs and great business builders. We got the best today, and we're going to have the best tomorrow for you. God bless you all. Thanks. See ya.